Hey folks, welcome to MLR Kickoff. We are in the finals edition. The elimination games are over. We're on to conference championship weekend. It is going to be a big one. 4 teams remain, 2 games remain. Only one champion will come out of that. The Professor, Pete Steinberg, joins me as always. Pete, early morning show for us.
Early morning show, yeah.
We've replaced the usual waters and teas for strong coffee. So cheers to you getting up early and doing the show. We had to do some reconfiguring, obviously. Been quiet, so no changes in MLR, pretty consistent and smooth. So yeah, here we are, early in the morning doing shows. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. So I am solo parenting this week, and my son, who's 2, that normally wakes up at 5:45, decided today would be the day that he would sleep until 7:15. Like Dan, it's one of, you go in and make sure he's alive because he never sleeps this late. And of course, I've got the show at 8, so my hair's a little messy. I don't have my MLR shirt on the way you have your MLR shirt on. I literally got back from dropping them off at daycare. Maybe didn't feed Elliot as well as I maybe should have. I'm like, yeah, you've had 4 bites of that. Let's go. He gets another breakfast at daycare. Yeah. So this morning was a little rush, but happy to be here.
I was going to say we could do the single parent podcast, but after your mess up this morning with Elliot, maybe that's not a great idea for a podcast right now. One of mine is gone. She's at swimming. She chose swimming and not realizing that if you're a swimmer, you train early in the morning. So
no, I know people. Well, I mean, coming if she has Australian blood in her, she's used to like getting up and going swimming, right? Isn't that what you guys all do when you're like 3 years old?
It's a little different. It's nice, and it's nice weather down there. It gets a little chilly in the morning still. The big one, he's the opposite of Elliot. He is sound asleep still. So
I am looking forward to those times. Like, if I can sleep past 6 o'clock in the morning nowadays, that's a huge win. And even even when they sleep past 6, I wake up like at 5:45, and I'm like, oh, they're going to wake up, and then those buggers sleep till 6:30. I'm like, come on. So
that would be a good. I want a couple of psychologists to do the psychology of why you wake up when you know you've got to be up instead of you sleep until your alarm goes off.
Yeah.
If you ever have like an early flight
always.
So in particular, like last year for MLR, right? We were in Indianapolis all year, and the only flight back, if we did a Sunday game, was very early Monday. That could get me back in time for work. So you'd have to be up at like 4:45 was the time you'd have to get up to get from the hotel to the airport to get you through. I must have woken up at 3, 3:15, 3:23, 3:27, and then you're just like, oh, I'm just going to stay up at this point. And it ruins your day.
So Dan, yes. This weekend is the first time that neither of us are doing a semi-final, a conference final for MLR in MLR history, right? You're not doing a game. I'm not doing a game.
Yeah, my wife thinks it's a conspiracy that the one year I take it off, that Father's Day just happens to be on a weekend where there's MLR games, because usually Mother's Day is the one that falls on a rugby weekend, and I'm gone doing a game somewhere for Mother's Day. But just so happened that Father's Day kind of wasn't on a bye week or something this week. It's like, well, how convenient. You're home for Father's Day. And I was like, sorry. So, yeah, no. It's how's it been? You did a couple of games this year.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did a couple of games. My schedule's been a little crazy, and so MLR offered me a couple of games that I just couldn't take. But Dan, I really enjoy doing those games. It's just like you said, it's long weekends, right? Like you were leaving often Friday, coming back Monday. I had one of those. Like, it's hard to give those weekends. My work's been really busy, so I've been traveling during the week, so it hasn't worked out. But I miss it. I miss I miss being more connected to the game. I mean, what I miss is being on site, right? That's the thing. If it was on site, I think I would make the sacrifice a little more. And I really enjoy like working with the guys in the studio. That's been a great experience. But what I really miss is feeling close to the game, and feeling close to the game is being on the pitch before the game, talking to the coaches, talking to the players. But COVID and dollars make sense for like what they call a remote model, where we all fly to a studio and do the games from the studio.
I do. I will say, yeah, you miss that, but from the remote stuff, you miss like coming in and having breakfast with Reese Edwards and Kyle Binder up there, who run Kyle with Tupelo, who runs out of Indianapolis, and Reese is MLR. So Reese Edwards, we've talked about him on the show, one of the absolute champion blokes of world rugby. He's done World Cup finals and the Premiership. He's done a bunch of Test matches. Did you do a Lions tour there at one point? I'm pretty sure he's done like a Lions tour as well.
Yeah,
he's done everything. He's got some great stories too, like the crazy times in television. And the problem is he'll probably sit down in 10, 15 years and MLR will have some of the craziest ones. He'll be like, one time in America.
To be fair, I deliberately skipped the show last week to stay out of all of the turmoil, but I'm not sure that the TV guys had the contingency plans that they needed to have over the last couple of weeks to work out where all the games are going to be.
You imagine being the poor graphics guy and you built your graphics for, Austin versus Houston in Austin, and they're like, well, hang on, no, you're not going to do that now. Okay, I'll build my Houston-Seattle graphics. Oh, you're not going to do that either now. What am I building? I'm not going to build anything until the day of the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's jump into the games from the weekend. 2 games. First time we go to the elimination format, so an extra week of finals. Let's start with that first. Do you like 3 teams making the playoffs?
I do. I'm a fan of playoff footy. I know that there's the classic, just whoever ends up on top. But if we're trying to build excitement for the game, I think we need games that mean something, and I think we need more excitement. And you saw that. I mean, I think it was week 17. Every game had a playoff implication in week 17. Right, that's pretty incredible. It makes all the games interesting. It brings more people to the game because the games are interesting. Like if we didn't have the elimination, half of those games wouldn't have been interesting, right? They wouldn't have been useful to watch. And so I think the eliminator round, I'm a fan. What about you, Dan?
I am too. I think we almost had like at least a 4th week of the finals because of what happened in that last week, and it was fortunate scheduling that it ended up that way, and obviously some other situations that arose that also made it quite interesting and exciting coming down the stretch there. Like Seattle, for example, were out, and all of a sudden, hey, you beat LA, you're in, which made it even more exciting. It generally was like a play-in, like you see for the NBA doing the play-ins now, aren't they? Which feels like those finals go on for 6 months. But I like it. I don't think we should go beyond 3 for now, because I look at the teams that come fourth, and they probably, for the most part, don't deserve to be playing finals.
Right.
San Diego on the West, technically, 5th, but 4th, and then 3rd. But I think it showed yesterday. We'll talk about that game against Seattle. Obviously, the preparation wasn't great. I think a few of the boys were in Mexico. Showed they probably shouldn't have been there anyway. So let's start on the East Coast. Let's go Atlanta, New York. It's become quite the rivalry. This was the conference championship game last year. Obviously, Atlanta win by a point, go on to the final. This year, New York, turn the tables on Atlanta, go on the road and get the win down there. This, to me, looked like 2 teams who were really nervous. They both really knew what was on the line here, and there was some tightness about both these ties.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm gonna confess, I was texting with Stats Boy a bit during this game because I watched this on replay because I watched the US women beat Australia.
I'm torn. I don't know how to feel about that. 14. I don't know any of the Australian women. I know a good majority of the US women.
So that was on at the same time. So I watched that, and then I watched the recording right afterwards of this game, and it just wasn't a very good game. It looked like 2 teams that weren't playing at their best. Like you said, they were really nervous. Some interesting stuff about it. New York continues to be a team that relies on its defense and then explosive plays, right? So they made 144 tackles. They only had 50 breakdowns in the whole game, which is like nuts. But Atlanta really struggled. They struggled in their kicking game. right? And that is really, really important to them. So they had 5 kick errors. New York really struggled at the breakdown. They had 7 breakdown penalties. Both teams had over 10 handling errors. It just wasn't a great game for either team. But, I think that, like, Stats Boy and I were chatting, and Stats Boy was like, remember, this game was 10-9 last year. So it's just like, it's 2 teams that lead with their defense, that lead with putting pressure. That leads to issues on the pitch, right? And I think New York were just more efficient. They had more explosive plays. Atlanta couldn't score when they had the opportunity to. And, New York come through it, but I don't think they come through it with a lot of confidence moving into, like, the next game.
I don't know. Winners are winning in the finals. I feel like you just take enough out of it to go into the next one. But we'll jump into the New England game. We'll go a little deeper into that because that's worth it. Let's go to Seattle, San Diego now, 43-19. It was a little tighter at the half. I think it was 21-14 at the half. San Diego, though, just looked rusty. Looked like they hadn't played for 6 weeks instead of effectively 3 weeks.
Yeah,
I think at that point, or 2 weeks, they had to bye in the last round. Sorry. What were your thoughts on this one?
Well, I mean, this was interesting because San Diego looked good in pieces, but just couldn't score. They had a number of missed lineouts, and in games like this, you miss that lineout, and it becomes really, really problematic, right? You have some real challenges when you miss, like, scoring opportunity lineouts, and they did that enough. I actually thought Seattle looked really, really good. AJ Alatimu, I mean, this guy, there was a period in the middle of the season when Seattle went through that downtime. The Alatimu wasn't playing. He was on the bench. And I was trying to work out what was going on because this guy is really, really important. Like, he had, 21 points kicking? So the penalty issues, like, that was like that, which is really interesting because you normally associate San Diego, right, with taking penalties. Like, you and I remember the semifinal against was it New York?
Where New York,
yeah, where they took the penalty and they went up with like 2 minutes to go. New York came back and won that one. I mean, I just think that there's but Alatimu is playing really, really well. Kicking really well out of the hand. JP Smith with his left foot. I think these guys look good. I don't know. Do you know what the news is with Lepetti? Because he hasn't played, but I thought actually Creel and Busby looked pretty good in the centers.
So Lepetti is a chance to play this weekend. Ben Landry out for the season.
Okay. Well, I mean, Duratalo had a good game. Travis Lawson had a good game. Rickard Hadding. This is a really, really good back row. And I think the back row is going to be actually the place where, like, we'll talk about this, about how they do well or how they have to do well moving forward. So, their bench is pretty strong. When you've got, Brad Tucker on the bench, that's a good sign. Like, Kellen Gordon's been a really good, like, stalwart for Seattle. So I think their bench is okay. But I think, so, they just were really efficient. They scored. They had, less breakdowns. They had less passes. They had more tackles. They had more kicks. They were willing to give away possession to be able to, to gain territory and then lead with their defense. And I thought it worked really well. The interesting thing, and I think, Dan, this is a little bit of sort of like the mental side. I just thought Seattle won the contact point. And that is something that when you come back together with, like, as coaches, we're very precious about our practice time. And so San Diego, pulling their team back together, lost a couple of days. The one thing you probably can't really prep for is the practice time. And that contact, right? Like, because they missed the last week. Like, they didn't play for 2 weeks and they didn't practice for probably 10 days of that. And when you come back, you can't get back into that contact. So I think that's the challenge.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because it was either going to go, and again, hindsight's always a pretty great way to look at anything, because you sound really smart when you use hindsight because you know what's happened. But if they were going to win this game, it was going to be an all-out, just an absolute open game, high scoring. They were never going to get into a dogfight here and drag this into the trenches, because I agree with you. Imagine the mentality of sitting on a beach down in Cabo and all of a sudden, boom, phone goes off and they're like, "Hey, we need you guys back. We're in an elimination game against Seattle on Sunday." Oh, at that point, does it cross your mind to be like, ignore and just put your cell phone back down?
I don't think so. I mean, look, you've worked, like, this is a team that's worked together all year. They've at moments look like the best team in the league. You say, yeah, let's go for it, but you just don't have the time. I mean, you can see this. Here's a difference in the team, right? In terms of how well they executed. San Diego had 9 handling errors, right? Seattle had 1. Like, 1 handling error in the game. That's a team that is playing well. I mean, this is a team that is seems to be timing their stuff, right? And timing what they're doing, I think, really, really well.
Yeah, and again, you look at the expulsion of LA and Austin. Boy, it sets up Seattle. All they need to do is go on the road. They beat Houston. I mean, people kind of forget they beat Houston a few weeks ago, because that penalty put Houston into the playoffs, and it felt like a loss for Seattle because they were effectively eliminated at that point.
But they won.
They won. That's right. They won the game at home. And honestly, felt like they looked a lot better than Houston, and then kind of took the foot off, and Houston snuck back into that game late, knowing they just had to get within 7 and get that 4th try, which they did. And then Seattle kind of just let them sneak back. But they should be going to Houston with a lot of confidence that they can get the job done. And then it's one game. I mean, they were the underdogs 2018, beat Glendale. I feel like they had to have been the underdogs in 2019 again, right?
Yep.
San Diego at home,
right,
in the championship. They win that game. Obviously, things haven't gone well since then, but they love this position they're in. They're familiar with it. A lot of the squad's been there and won in this position. So,
yeah, it's interesting. One guy that really stood out was Duncan Matthews. Like the 15. I mean, his footwork was phenomenal. He had 10 carries, 147 meters run, which a fullback, normally like has the most meters because they catch the ball and they can run for 20 meters without coming across a defender from a kick. Yeah. But he had a clean break, he had 2 offloads, and he had 4 defenders beaten, all team highs, right? And so I think Duncan Matthews at 15 is a real live wire that can really make an impact. And it's someone that Houston are going to have to be careful of.
All right, let's preview the games, because we're dancing around it already. Rose, we'll just jump right into it. Let's start Saturday. Seattle at Houston. It's a 7 p.m. Eastern kickoff. 6 p.m. in Houston on June 18th. It's going to be hot. It's going to be humid. It's going to be sticky. Everything that Seattle is not. So how do you see this one playing out?
Well, I think that I'm trying to go all the way back to the Seattle-Houston game and have a look at those stats. I'm just kind of working my way back there. I think this is going to be a really interesting game. When Houston started the season, they really looked like a team that had that was physical, that had those South African roots, right? They were physical, they were good defenders, but they didn't score very much, right? They ground games out. They played a little bit slower, right? I think Smith at 9 slowed the ball down, and they played very deliberately. It feels like the last month or so, they've picked up that pace, and you can see them with their scoring, right? They've scored more points. Like, we even talked about that Seattle game that they lost, but they actually kind of won, but they were able to generate points. I think that's what they're going to have to do against this Seattle team. I don't think this is going to be a 10-9 game, a 15-12 game. I think it's going to be another 45-35 game. And I think that means that it's going to be really about who can execute and be most efficient when they've got those opportunities.
Well, who do you think can? We haven't got lineups, and that's going to be a big thing because both teams have some injury concerns. Obviously, we've mentioned Lepetti in Seattle. Danny Barrett's been in and out of the side. I think he makes a big difference, and he's a guy, in my opinion, that loves big moments. Like,
right.
He always seems to, develop and grow as a player in big moments, which is what coaches absolutely love. They can rely on a guy to lift his game. So, knowing how the lineups have looked, again, last time we saw Houston, they lost to Austin, but there was pretty much their B team was out in the field. We haven't seen them go hard for 2 weeks now. What are you thinking here? Seattle, battle tested. LA, San Diego, 2 really big physical games. Are they going to be just worn down coming into this one?
So I don't think Seattle are going to be worn down. I don't think that's it. I think this game is going to be won in the back row. So I think that it's going to be all about that battle for the contest at the ruck, right? And so Willie Britt's been playing 8, right? I think we heard early on this season the fastest player on the Houston team.
Yeah, Al Jabbouri said he's the fastest. Oh, I thought he was joking, but he was just deadpan as he said it. And it's like, right, fair enough.
So I think that so that was a surprise to us, because I think Willie Britt's experienced international, player that's played all around the world internationally, and is, I think, 33 or 34. So his matchup against Hadding is going to be really interesting. I think it's Grassman that's been playing number 7 for Houston, going up against Travis Lawson. I think Travis Lawson is having an underrated season because he's doing all the work at the breakdown that allows players like Hadding to run around, right, and get their hands on the ball and make the big hits. And so I think those matchups are going to be really, really interesting.
It will be. You got to remember, like, Nakai Penny was having a good year at 7 for Seattle before he got hurt as well. So it's always great when you see someone like Larson who steps up and fills that role. I don't know. I would be interested to know how many tickets they've sold for this. I know they sold quite a few when they thought they were hosting the elimination. So the crowds in Houston came back once they started winning. Yeah, I mean, they started selling a lot more tickets down there. And I know, like, a Saturday 6 p.m. local time kickoff is still going to be quite hot, but that's late enough where kids' sports going to be done by 6. You can get down there. Parking's easy. They probably should. What do you reckon? 3+ for this game?
Oh, I think so. And I think it's, it'll be interesting to see if that makes a difference. Seattle do play well at home, right? We know that. And so in their game against San Diego, they do get some advantage, and it'll be interesting to see if Houston can. A couple more things, I think, if I go back and look at that last game, is Houston, and one of the interesting things is going to be the referee. I thought we saw 2 different refereeing, two different refereeing styles. I thought Mike Lash, he yellow carded someone in the first 2 minutes, and that was kind of like he really wanted to put a stamp down in the game and make sure that that players knew, right, that he was watching. And that's actually important for a referee. Like you Dan, you and I both know the wonderful thing about rugby is every referee referees the game differently, and players need to identify how the referee is refereeing and then play to how they referee, right? So some referees really, tight at the breakdown, some aren't, right? And so I think that it's going to be really interesting to see who the referees are for the game, because at that breakdown, that's going to be really important. The other thing that I think is going to be really critical is going to be Seattle's goal line defense. Houston tend to get close to the line and then wear you down with their forwards. Like they always have like a couple hundred ball carries. And when you have a couple hundred ball carries or 150 ball carries or something like that, it's mainly because you've got like 20 pick and goes to score, like in a couple of minutes. And so Seattle's defense is going to be close. I've underrated Houston all year. Like I've looked at them, I've said, I don't know if these guys really have what it takes, but they've been playing really, really well for the last 4 weeks. And as much as, you have recency bias and Seattle look really good, I think I'm going to choose Houston here. And I think I'm going to choose Houston because I think that they're going to be a bit more physical, right? San Diego lost all the contact points. right? And I think Houston, if they can match the intensity of Seattle at the contact, I think they win this game.
Unfortunately, I agree with you. No, the refereeing piece is interesting because because we're a bit of a melting pot, right, for referees. We've had referees from all over the world, and they all bring their own unique style
right.
and methodologies to how they referee a game. But for big games, I think the more you keep the whistle in the pocket and just let it kind of happen, the better. Like, hey, maybe in week 3 I blow a penalty there, but really, has that player, diving off their feet affected the game that much?
Exactly.
Like, has it? Probably not. Let it go. Like, let both teams kind of figure this out. And I don't know who the referee would be to kind of do that. I mean, I've never been shy about saying I'm a big fan of the way Scott Green referees a game. I like Lashy as well. I haven't been, to be fair to the other refs, I haven't really, paid close attention to some of the other refs in the middle this year. But those two, they grew up in New Zealand, which plays a pretty open, fast style of rugby, and right. I think refereeing indicates that. So, yeah, and again, who does that favour? Does like a referee that just puts it in the pocket and lets it go favour, Seattle or Houston here?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I would say that if I think that Houston, don't score as freely as Seattle, so they want a referee that is not going to referee the breakdown very cleanly, because that slows the game down, and they want the game to be slow because that reduces the number of points. It allows them to use their forwards to score points when they get close. I think that they would want someone that isn't going to be really strict at the breakdown, while Seattle will want the game to be more open. There's, this is sort of one of these games, Dan, where if you say, if the total points scored, right, is below 50, Houston wins. And if the total points scored is above 50, Seattle wins.
We'll timestamp that for next week.
Okay.
We got that. I want to see how that one plays out. Yeah, that'll be interesting. Do we know the refereeing assignments? I think we've seen one. Federico Anselmi has New England, New York, which
Scott Green for Houston, Seattle.
Scott Green has.
Okay, so I agree with you. I think Scott has the best, and I think Mike Lash is a very good referee. But I think Scott Green has a great feel of the game. So I think Scott will let the game flow more. I think that's probably advantage Seattle.
Advantage Seattle. See, and I think the benefit to Greeny is he's been here since year 1, and if anything, he knows MLR and the evolution of the game here. Where sometimes if I'm a big Mike Lash. I think Mike Lash is a phenomenal referee. But I'm a talker. Like, I'm a communicator, and I like the fact that him and Scott talk to players. They don't talk at players, they talk to players, which is a big difference. I feel like sometimes you can have that rapport. Now, it doesn't mean that you're always going to do what they say, but you just at least listen. Sometimes you can diffuse a situation by just saying, get it off your chest. Obviously, you're frustrated. You're out here, in a physical contest. There's a lot of emotions. Say your piece, but then it's not going to change my decision. My decision is my decision. So I feel those two kind of handle the personalities a little bit better. I bet you there's some characters. I bet you there's, and they'd be interested to, once the season's done, maybe we get those two on the show and just be like,
yeah, that'd be great. I think that's
who is the best to talk to? Who's got the best chat? I'm guessing Dylan Fawcett will feature heavily in both of them, because I think Butch just has great chat, full stop. But there'd be some other ones, I'm sure. I'm sure some number 9s in the league that have some good chat too.
I mean, I'd imagine Andy Ellis might be. Andy Ellis is probably the best referee on the pitch when he plays.
Yeah.
So he's always there to help the referee make some calls.
Yeah.
Give a little advice here and there.
The old dog's seen everything. Why not? We have spent way too much time on Seattle, Houston here, but I'm going to go Houston, even though, I just think it's time. I mean, that sets up a new champion.
I think the other thing I would say is, look, both of the coaches for Seattle and Houston are experiences in the coaching staff, but there's like real international playoff spirit experience in the, like, they'll know how to prep for this, and their prep will be really tight. And so I think that, I think they're gonna, that Houston team's gonna be ready to play.
Shout out to friend of the show, JT on Yet too. Like,
oh yeah,
it's been a journey for JT coming over from baseball and coming to rugby, and then he's seen some interesting stuff in his first couple of years here, and to get that team to the playoffs now, and he does a lot of. JT, we just had a note from Ryan Gint. JT is the most talked about guy on this show. He's probably the only bloke who listens to the show, so that's why we talk about him. So if other people start listening, you'll get some love too. But no, I love JT. Hey, we're gonna play some golf, buddy. I'll be in town in July. Hit me up. I want to get on Mike Lawyer's country club. So make it happen. Yeah. All right, let's go to the next game. And then probably the second most talked about executive is Tom Kindly. So New England, New York. All the pressure here, in my opinion, is on the Free Jacks. Best team all year. Probably could have run the table if they wanted to. Like, they lost to LA out in the West Coast early in the season. Yeah, maybe that hurts them, but they don't really put the performance against Toronto that need to. And the game against New York, to me, I feel like was the best thing that could happen to them, to lose that game going to the playoffs, just to kind of ground them and get them refocused here. It's but heavy is the crown, right? The pressure is on them to now win this game against their rivals. New York can kind of come in loose and be like, hey, we got through Atlanta. We've been to this game 3 times before. This is the 3rd time we've been to this game. We've lost the last 2. We just got to kind of let it go here. But what do you think, Pete?
I'm not sure I agree. I agree with that. Like, I mean, I think there's pressure on both teams. I don't think teams. I think New England come in. I mean, it's both teams come in. I don't think there's extra pressure on New England. I think that I would say that they come in with confidence, right? They come in with confidence that they are the best team. They played. So hold on, I want to pull this up. So they played New York, what, two weeks ago, right? A game that they didn't have to win. That they didn't select heavily for, right? And they were pretty dominant in that game. Right? I mean, they had the more balls, like they had way more possession, double the amount of possession. I mean, there was lots of penalties in this game. There was 17 penalties against New York, like 7 at the breakdown, goes back to what happens at the breakdown. The set piece by both teams was really good, but it was a pretty good performance by a New England team that was missing like camaraderie, a whole bunch of players. And although I think that might have been the game that Bowden Wacker came back. I mean, John Poland didn't play in that game. Like they played a mixed side and were competitive against, I think, a pretty strong side that New York put out that already had, Milner, Scudder, and Holo. They were in that team. So, is this even going to be close?
Oh, New York fans, it's finals. Like, I doubt there's going to be a blowout. It's one of the great rivalries early MLR, New England, New York. Like, the hatred for these two teams, it goes off the field. Like, administrators hate each other. Owners, I don't know. Like, Eric Anderson probably doesn't hate anyone. He's like, he's like Ryan Reynolds of Major League Rugby. He's like the nicest guy ever, good looking, rich. God, screw you, Eric. But there's no way this is a blowout. This is a tight game.
Can we timestamp that, Stats Boy? I don't know.
If it's below 50, no, I don't even know if we'll get to 50. I don't
think this is a high-scoring game. I just don't know that. I think that the way I would put this, Dan, is that if New York and the Free Jacks and New England play their best, I think the Free Jacks win this by 15. I think they're a 15-point better team. It doesn't mean that they're going to win on the day, because there's lots of things. Like if the Free Jacks don't play their best, New York can win.
Yeah.
But if the Free Jacks play their best, they win, and I think they win relatively easily.
All right. Here's the big question. At this point of the season, physical preparation is done. There is nothing either team can do this week physically that will give them a significant edge on the weekend. This is mental warfare right now. So, which team is mentally tougher? Which coaching staff is sharper in terms of how they're going to prepare their team for this game?
Well, I think that we've got I think we've got unknowns. I'm not sure that we know. But
Who are your leaders on each team? Like, let's put it this way: if you're in a huddle and you've got Bowden Walker in one huddle and Andy Ellis in the other, which huddle do you want to be in?
Okay. So I think like, it's going to hurt me to say it. I think you're bringing up a good point, Dan, because I think what I'm hearing you say is the experience, the elite experience in the New York lineup is stronger than the elite experience in the Free Jacks lineup. Is that what you're saying?
I am.
Yeah. I think I would agree with that. Right? So I think that there's and that's where I go to playing your best. But I think like Conradi, Johnston, like Bowden Wacker, Dougie Fife, there's experience there. It may not have the elite all black flavor of the and probably the Eagle flavor too, right? Of New York. Like I think it was interesting that Nick Savetta came off the bench. I wonder if he starts this weekend. Right? That's a strong bench, right? Having him come off the bench. So I just think it's interesting to think about it that way. And that might be why the Free Jacks don't play their best and New York do.
Do you know the only thing that beats experience in these situations? Ignorance. Not knowing any better. Like having a guy like Cam Davidovich on the other side is like, I don't know who Andy Ellis is. I'll just smash him. Like, I'm serious. There's a lot to be said for that. And you probably coach players like this. I've played with players like this.
Right.
I'm like, oh my God, we're playing against so-and-so and they've done this. And I was my own worst enemy. I would start steal Mark O'Keefe's term. I'd start my head karate on a Thursday for a Saturday game. And by the time Saturday come around, I'd be exhausted thinking about like I was prepared because I knew what everyone could do and what was coming. Other guys there wouldn't know. They're like, who's that? Oh, we're playing against, Nanny Milne Scudder this weekend. Oh, who's that? Is he a local guy? Did he play for the New Jersey team? No, actually he didn't. So
I think that's right. But I'm going to go to the back row, and New York against Atlanta played Dylan Fawcett at 8, and he's a great rugby player, but he's not a great 8. And if you say Dylan Fawcett,
great game at 8, I'll give him that.
He did have a great game. He was up against Jason Dam, who has been injured this season, who I think has great potential. I think Jason Dam is probably going to be going to the next World Cup if he stays healthy. But I think up against Ryan Conradi, I think that there's an advantage there. And I actually think that there's an advantage in the back row for New England with Joe Johnston. I think he's maybe the best number 7 in the league. I think that back row is going to be really, really important for the way that there's a really interesting thing about how the Free Jacks play on attack and how that matches up against New York. Because what the Free Jacks do is the Free Jacks, like I want to go back and look at like some of the stats that exist for the players is ridiculous. That Bowden Wacker will make like 10 passes in a game, and he'll have like 6 carries into the breakdown. So he'd have touched the ball 15 or 16 times as a 10, which is ridiculous. But what they do is they just use their forwards. Their forward that like John Poland feeds their forwards. They have to win that physical battle up front. And New York's defense is excellent out wide, right? They're very, very good. They're very difficult to break down around the outside. I'm not sure that their type 5 is the physical defenders that they need to be around the French.
Gotcha.
So that to me is going to be a really, really interesting piece, just because of the. I don't want to say simple because I don't think it's fair, because actually Poland has 2 or 3 options with their runners off the forward, so it's not like they're hitting one runner. There are 3 players attacking the line, and Poland picks one, and so it's actually very difficult to defend. And if they're able to get that go forward, then Wacker only gets the ball when there's space to attack, whether that's kicking, running, or passing. And that's why Wacker looks so amazing, It's all the work that the forwards do. And so it's not clear to me that New York can stop that.
I will say I think Bodie Walker's player of the year, like not even close. I mean, there's some argument, maybe some other players to be in the conversation, but to me, it's Bodie Walker. And he carried that hype from early in the season too, because he came out of the gates firing, and he's carried it, and his performance has lived up to that hype all year. One of the big ones is when they ran into New York early in the season, and he was on fire, and he went down to Hoboken and tore them to shreds.
Right.
And I don't know if those scars have disappeared yet. Those wounds have healed for New York, because if he gets, I would be bashing him as much as I can early on if I'm New York. That first 20 minutes, we talked about like his mix between pass and carry. Such a great ball runner. He can pass, but he can carry. He's big enough and physical enough to take the ball into contact against loose forwards. But he can also, move and isolate big front row forwards and create opportunities. For New England, and this is going to be hard for Walker to do, I would pass early as much as I can, because I just feel as though deflect the pressure as much as I can away from you. Let Conradi and Johnson take carries early where you would normally want to carry the ball, and see if you can just wear that defense. Just take the shine off that first step of the New York defense. And as soon as you start to see hands go on the knees, then, it's like, I love a movie reference. Remember in Rocky IV when Drago's fighting Apollo and he's not punching, and Drago, Apollo's dancing, he's snapping out jabs and bang, and all of a sudden the Russian coach, Ostasio, and then all of a sudden Drago just goes boom. And, 4 minutes later we're in tears, as Rocky's holding Apollo, and the rest is history. I don't want to go into it. It makes me upset, but that's almost Walker's got to take a Drago approach to this game and just be super patient early. The game's not going to get away from him in the first 20 minutes. Get your touches, kick, plenty of passing, go to the line, but maybe pass a little earlier this time. Turn back inside to your Conradis, your Johnsons. Find some big ball runs. You've got two great centers, big centers. Get across, maybe pull early, see if you can get New York chasing you early and switch them back inside for some soft shoulders. But I would just have Dougie Fife in the locker room and be like, Dougie, this is what I'm going to do. Every time I take the ball to the line, I need immediate feedback. What's happening in that line? Who's chasing? Who's pulling? Where are they coming at? And then eventually him and Fife are going to lock it up and be like, all right, 13's turning in. They're looking to shoot on you. And then all of a sudden you can play two centers, 13 channel, bang, out the back to Fife. Mitch Wilson. Congrats to Mitch Wilson, by the way, getting picked in the Eagles. Well deserved. I'm a massive Mitch Wilson fan. I think that kid can play. But I see more past the victory here, Pete, for New England than I do New York. And New York's got a very simplistic approach to winning this. And I think New England can nullify that a lot easier than what New York can nullify the potential that New England has here, which sets up Free Jacks Sabercats in the final. It should be a good game.
Yeah, just a couple of things, Dan, before we wrap up, that kind of reinforces that. So in the New York Free Jacks game, and I know that the Free Jacks rotated for this game, but Bodie Walker carried the ball 6 times and had 13 passes, so he had 20 touches. Joe Johnston carried the ball 17 times and had 9 passes. Right, so he had 26 touches. Cameron Davidowitz had 11 ball carries and 6 passes. So he only had like 3 touches. Your number 6 only had 3 touches less than your fly half. Wayne Van Der Beek had 14 carries and 11 passes. So your center has more carries, more touches than your fly half. This is what they do, I think, very smartly, is that they choose the moments that Walker needs to touch the ball, right? And if it's not a good time to touch the ball, then let someone else touch it. And I think that's going to be really interesting. I think for New York, what they're going to have to do is a little bit of what they did in that game. They've got to put pressure on the scrum, right? They have to put pressure on the line out, and they did both of those in their game before, recognizing that there were some slightly different lineups, but both teams did pretty well, but New York were excellent. They had 15 lineouts, only lost 1. The Free Jacks had 17 lineouts, lost 3, which would be okay. I think they need the edge there. And what they have to do is they have to have better discipline. They can't have 17 penalties. They have to listen to the referee. They can't give those breakdown penalties. They have to, just like you said, Dan, I think you got it right. New York have a relatively narrow pathway to win that they can do, but it starts with a little bit of an edge in the set piece and then having really good discipline at the breakdown.
There you go. So who's your final?
Oh, I mean, I think it's like I said, I think it's the Free Jacks. I think if they play their best, they rotate.
End up going with Seattle on the other one?
Yeah, I think it's
Houston. You stay with Houston.
Yeah.
Okay. We're agreeing. It's boring, but no, well, I agree with you. I think the only thing, if they can rattle them early and use that experience in big games, New York can get it done. I think it's going to be I think it's going to be a tighter game. I think Houston are set to kind of blow the doors off Seattle. I think Seattle they've played 2 grand finals in a row. I don't know. Some say battle tested. I think they might be a little worn down, and then that road trip is going to be tough as well. But all right.
I think Houston will be fresher. I think they'll be mentally prepared. I think Seattle will be prepared. I just think that the physicality, like with Seattle, they're a physical team. Houston's one of the few teams in the league that you would say probably a bit more physical than Seattle. And like I said, if Houston can match the physicality of Seattle, prevent their big forwards, Samu Manoa and Ricard Hadding from getting that go forward in the middle of the field, then Alatimu doesn't have the space, then they can put pressure. I think that physicality is going to be really important. I think Houston have the edge. So I'm with Houston and New England, and I want to get through these games this weekend before I talk anything about the final.
Okay, perfect. Well, we can revisit that at a later date. Pete, that wraps it up. Thanks, buddy. Enjoy the games this weekend. Should be good. One Saturday, one Sunday.
It's going to be a great one. When are they?
Saturday, Sunday. I said that. It's Saturday night, Sunday afternoon. We're all good. New England, New York.
I'm trying to work out oh man. All right, so Saturday afternoon might have to be on delay. Sunday is during that time, so that should be okay.
Just throw it up on the screen. You'll be all right. On one of your 1,000 screens in that house.
Yeah.
You'll figure it out. All right, Pete. Good show. Right, good season. Good season, buddy. I'm enjoying it. So we will catch up next week and we'll dive into the championship game. Pete Steinberg, Professor, Aaron Castro, Ryan Ginty, and our entire crew here at MLR Kickoff. I'm Dan Power, and we will catch you next time.